Our next guest is no stranger to AWS, and if you're following him on Twitter, you'd think the two of them don't get along. Why does it always seem like he's posting something against AWS? Well, honestly, it's not just AWS. He also posts some stuff on some guy called Larry at Oracle. Joining us today is Corey Quinn, and I feel like he doesn't need a long introduction or no introduction at all. So why don't you hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because it's time to get this party started. Please join me in welcoming Cloud Economist at the Duckbill Group, Corey Quinn, to the show. Corey, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, John. A pleasure to finally be able to put this together. We've been flirting with it for months and months and months now. So finally, you wound up cornering me at one of the summits in San Francisco. And the best way to get someone to do something like this is to ask them in a situation where they cannot possibly say no. And there you go. Believe me, I am very accustomed to this pattern. Usually I'm just on the other side of it.
You know what? He's not lying. That's actually what happened. Him and I were talking about it, and I'm like, Corey, I've been trying to get you on a call for a while now. You know, dropped you some here. Like, I didn't get your message. I didn't get your email. I didn't. Well, now that we were face to face, you're like, yeah, I guess we got to do it.
My excuses, they ran out.
Nice. I like it. So, Corey, actually, the last time you and I were on a recording was probably in the early pandemic series, 2020. We did a 3-part webinar series with Jeff Barr. It turned out really great. The feedback from everybody was pretty cool. And, you know, our careers have taken different paths from when we started out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still out here indulging my ongoing love affair with the sound of my own voice. So I don't know how divergent mine has gone, but yeah, you were at AWS then, and now you're not at AWS now because I see the John Myer logo above your head, not the AWS with the smirk logo on it. So, you know, we wind up with different paths, but that's the nice thing is the people in this space tend to remain relatively constant. Their employers do change in the fullness of time.
I think that's what goes to show that if you're still you, no matter what, regardless of where you go, people will follow you because you're you. It's your personality.
There's something to be said for building an authentic brand. And the thing that drives me up a wall is when you have these people doing public facing things, developer advocacy, developing, etc. And they leave a company and go to a competitor, and suddenly they have nothing but negative things to say about the thing that a month ago they were telling you to sign up for and staking their own authenticity on. And it just demonstrates a certain lack of maturity and thought and a lack of willingness to look at the long-term consequences. It's okay. So should I believe the things you're telling me now, or should I just wait till you go work somewhere else? And you'll tell me why I would have been an idiot to listen to you now. I don't like that pattern. Having a consistent perspective and consistent voice is useful, but let's also be clear. Opinions do also evolve. You just have to telegraph those opinion shifts and call them out when they happen.
Yeah, you have to capture them, and the trust factor from going from one to the other. Now, I'm no longer with AWS, but I still love it. The people there, you know, it was just fun. I miss the people. I miss some of the people I worked with and the ability to do it. But I think where I'm at now, it allows me to provide a better voice for Amazonians because they don't like other Amazonians talking about Amazonians, where I'm on the outside and I get to actually capture their stories. So they let me in a little bit more.
I find that when I try and get folks on my podcast to talk about what they're working on, there's a whole bunch of red tape that goes into it as well. Like, well, you have to be press certified and you have to make sure that you're not gonna like, they act as if I'm about to just start dragging people on the show. Like I have on the Screaming in the Cloud podcast, I have something like 400 episodes out now. And as I look through them all, there's not a single example of me doing that to anyone. But yep, that's it. I've decided to finally snap and just drag some random developer advocate from a service team, and because that's the whole plan that I was building up for. Yeah, if you give me Adam Selipsky, I can understand the concern. There's also, to be direct, very little point in giving me Adam Selipsky because I've never once seen any indication that he does anything other than stick religiously to talking points in public. As he grows into the role, ideally that'll start to change. But right now, it's well, honestly, I can do a better dramatic reading of a press release than he can. So what's the point? I digress.
Definitely a better dramatic press release. Okay, I have a question for you. When you and I were at San Francisco, in fact, we ran into each other at reInvent. I didn't get a chance to corner you there for joining the show, but San Francisco worked out much better, smaller crowd.
I was a lot less running around busy.
Yeah, it was actually only one little floor for us to do everything and talk. And we had probably this was a total improv conversation. What, like 30 minutes? You and I were probably standing there talking about it. And I gained a different perspective and understanding of who Corey is. Because what you see on Twitter, what you see, and I don't see much on LinkedIn from you, but what you see on Twitter is definitely your personality. But when you get to talk to you, it's your personality, but you have an in depth conversation where Twitter, you have 144 characters versus, hey, listen, Corey, I understand you have this point of view, but I have to ask you, I think you're a little misunderstood from the crowd, from the people. Now, you have a huge following, but I think your perspective and your personality is a little misunderstood from really actually getting to know you.
I would say that's probably right. It's hard to remember the human on the other side of the screen, and the pandemic has done no one any favors in that. Historically, in previous years, someone doesn't like something I write or something I say. It's a lot easier in those days to wind up sitting down and having a chat with them. And generally speaking, when someone despises me, one of the best ways I found to overcome that has always been, well, let's talk for half an hour and we'll see what you think of at the end of it. And overwhelmingly, the response to that has always been, "Oh, you're not just a cynical, bitter asshole." It's, "No, no, I am, but there's more nuance to it than that is all." And because again, my entire job here, as I see it, is to shine a somewhat harsh and often sarcastic light on large companies in this industry. It's I speak first and foremost as a customer of these companies and the services that I'm trying to consume to build a thing that is often in its own right terrible. But the so when I see things that aren't working right or a bad developer experience, my failure mode as a developer myself has always been that I assume that I'm somehow stupid, that I am not good enough to use these things. And that's wrong. It's that the interface is crappy and the documentation is Byzantine and the story is bizarre. But that is not a failing on my part. And calling that out and doing the learning in public thing and saying the quiet part out loud has really resonated with an awful lot of people. Remember, when I started doing this, I had less than 2,000 Twitter followers. And my first issue in the newsletter went to 500 people. It's gotten bigger since then just because what I'm saying does resonate. And not everyone's gonna like me, and a lot of people wish that I would just say the positive things, but at that point, I should just shut it down and get a job in marketing. You can't buy my opinion, you can buy my attention at best.
Why do you take to Twitter first? Is it easier or is it better to actually get more visibility? I mean, granted, I do like some of the threads that you follow through. I get a kick out of it. I don't take them personally. If you were to drop a Twitter thread on me about it, though there's not much information, but I would probably laugh and enjoy it, because of how you come across. But that's me. That's my personality. I don't try to
I
take
make
things
it a point not to
personally.
go after individuals with the exception of Larry Ellison, to be very clear here, and that there's a reason behind that. It's like, you don't want individuals to read a thing and feel crappy, and I do understand and accept that, this is something I've gotten wrong in years past, that Amazon has a bunch of very small service teams, and from the Amazonian perspective, I'm making fun of effectively 3 people in a room making a decision. Well, from my perspective, it's a $1.5 trillion company that's put out a thing that makes hundreds of millions of dollars a month because I see it on customer bills, and no one is pointing out the challenges with it and the ludicrous aspects of it. That's the voice I've always tried to be. So my point has never been to make individuals feel bad. It's to, if anything, have companies realize that some of their messaging doesn't land right, doesn't resonate right. Now, the more I see how the sausage is made, the more I realize how nuanced and challenging this tightrope act is. And I'm certainly not suggesting I get it right all the time, but doing better today than I did yesterday is sort of the entire goal.
How many Amazonians might reach out to you and be like, they take it a little personally that you're attacking one of their services rather than kind of sitting back and realizing that you're just trying to be the voice of the customer and on this side. Now, and I'm going to spin that question just a little bit more is that AWS does bring you in for a lot of these conversations or a lot of these talks. So for a company that I want to say call out and I don't want to say poke fun of, but you have a little fun and humor but they also bring you in. Doesn't that speak volume as well?
In the interest of full disclosure, Amazon does more than that. They pay me for my advice as voice of the customer style feedback. And overwhelmingly, the answer to this, how often does that happen, is almost never. Because what does happen a lot is, okay, so you did your whole dog and pony show about the service. Yes, yes, the jokes are hilarious. Tell me more about why it is you feel that way. Tell me about your use case. Tell me how it is you see this service fitting in. And because there's an overwhelming customer obsession that really does shine through on the Amazonian side of it. Because again, 90 to 95% of what Amazon does is great. It's that missing 5 to 10% where the hilarity lives, and that's where the uncomfortable improvement opportunities are. And yeah, I could spend my time talking about how great all this other stuff is, but they already do that a lot. Few people are out talking about the dissatisfied aspects, about this thing would be so much better if only it fill in the blank here.
Now, you do that. You actually bring that value. It would be so much better if you do X, or what is the thought process behind it? Now, you put a lot more humor into it and a little more sarcastic and snark. I personally enjoy. I mean, I'm following you on Twitter because I want to see what your comment is next. It's almost like, Howard Stern. It's like, why are there more listeners that don't like him versus those who do? Because you want to know what's going to happen next. I actually find some of your stuff, and it resonates with me. Now, I might not agree with everything that you have to say, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. But more times than not, I'm going through something, and I'm like, he's got a point here. Or I don't take it personal. I'm laughing at some of the feed, at some of the calls that you're on, or the what was the other one that you were actually doing a live tweet about? Actually, you do a live tweet about a bunch of them, but they're revenue calls that happen.
Oh, the earnings calls every quarter. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
fun. It's a let's because that's one of the most corporate phrasing of anything that leaks into the public view. So, how do we translate this with basically no filter, and how do we explain this to people without saying the sort of without saying the quiet part out loud? And I have no partners in this space, and my largest customer is a low single digit percentage of revenue. So, I no one is going to be able to threaten me into keeping quiet on a thing. I my opinions are consistently my own. And that is something that adds significant value. When I start using a service and doing live tweets with screenshots, I don't know how it's going to end. I haven't prepared that in advance. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's terrible, but this is how I iteratively work through things. I have a knack for stumbling blindly into sharp edges, but a lot of people do that. And there is value in doing things like that, in a way that expresses to other people, my primary audience on this, of course, being other customers, that, yeah, when you have trouble with this thing, it's not just you. That's the overwhelming message I'm trying to bring in. Now, I don't necessarily think that most people are hate following me. There are maybe a dozen people or so that don't like what I say and respond with weird comments sometimes. But the overwhelming number of people who respond are doing so either positively or aren't saying anything at all. And that's, again, it's fine. I like the story. You asked why Twitter, fast feedback, and it's somewhat ephemeral. Whereas if I write a detailed long blog post on something and I misunderstood something at the very outset, well, that was a whole lot of wasted time now, wasn't it? Whereas being able to get instant feedback and instant gratification by tossing something out there to a bunch of people who are generally aware of the industry and the ebb and flow of various service patterns, it helps sharpen the thought process. It really tightens the feedback loop, and it leads to better outcomes for everyone. Plus, let's be honest, I enjoy it. It's fun.
I think we all enjoy it as well. From when you transitioned in 2020, I actually had a chance to meet you at AWS SKO in Chicago. It was on a bar right outside of it. We won't get into details what happened. No, just kidding. Um, but I had a chance to meet you, and the next day you were at our keynote. You were a guest that came up and did a speaking session. And then during that time, shortly after, everybody's not going anywhere, and we were trying to figure out something to do. And I think I tagged you on Twitter. I was like, anybody up for this? How about you? And you like jumped in, and then Jeff Barr jumped in, and then we had a whole like party going on. And you went from a small amount of followers in the last 2 years to, what are you up now? What's your Twitter account? Hold on a second. I should know this.
Good question.
Now, for a quick interruption, a huge shout out to our friends at Veeam for sponsoring this episode. Veeam Backup for AWS can easily protect all of your Amazon EC2, RDS, and VPC data. Wait a second. They can protect my VPC data too? Yep, that's right. Simplify AWS backup and recovery while ensuring security and compliance. All right, now back to our episode.
As of we're recording this, 86.3 thousand. Yeah, when I started this, I had less than 2,000, and it took me all of 7 years to build that up. Now it's grown geometrically since then, and I've gotten better at tweeting. I found my voice in a way that lends itself to this, and for better or worse, it does lead to some really interesting conversations and equivalent outcomes.
Now, I have a
I don't pretend
question.
to understand it. I mean, again, my jokes are mostly for me. The fact that I
Yeah,
finally found a way to express them in a way that resonates with others, well, that's kind of a bonus.
but I think the thing is that your personal or your personality is the same no matter what. Whether you're sitting here on a recording with me or in San Francisco. By the way, I enjoyed our conversation in San Francisco because I got to know more about you and your deep thought process, and I was understanding where you were coming from your tweets and your personality, and I got a little more insight into it. Now, if you would have asked yourself the old Corey Quinn before, like say pandemic, a little bit before, would you be still be doing the same thing?
Remember, I've been doing this in various forms for 5 years now, and it was a big gamble. I got fired from my last job. Imagine that I worked at a small startup where things were great, and I was building and doing interesting things. And then we got acquired by a giant finance company. And it turns out that my personality works in those environments about as well as you would think. I also like solving problems in at tilting at those windmills. And initially, the first few months of a job, people love me because I'm solving a lot of the problems in the area I was brought in to address things in. And then that's mostly taken care of, and I start looking for big, interesting problems, and I find them in other people's areas, and office politics is challenging because you're not opting out, you're forfeiting. And I was very bad in those days at expressing, what I saw and what I was attempting to achieve, so I got fired an awful lot. So setting up a independent consultancy seemed like the next logical approach. I focused it around a problem that I could solve repeatably and well in an advisory capacity, the AWS bill, though I had a few other options I was toying with. It really caught on, and one thing led to another. A couple of years in, I took on a business partner, Mike, who's the CEO of the Duckbill Group now. We're 11 people as of this recording, and things continue to work really well for us. I was expecting to get yelled at and shut down after I started doing the in public performance art stuff, but it started as marketing. Pay attention to me and understand this is the problem I solve. So when you have that problem, I'm top of the mental SEO stack. And then things sort of spiraled from there. My plan originally was to basically finally validate what everyone always told me, that, yeah, my jokes aren't funny, that I'm getting it wrong, and my personality does, in fact, hold me back. At which point I could go back to my middle name and back to using my maiden name, and the whole Corey Quinn persona basically just fades away. And that never happened. Like, that was my exit, and I don't believe I need that exit hatch anymore.
Okay, so is Corey Quinn ever sorry or apologize for any of his tweets that he puts out there and realizes his mistake? Now, I know the answer to this because I obviously follow you on some of the things, but if you put something out there, do you correct yourself or apologize on any
Of course,
level
an
that you were
apology
like,
cost me absolutely nothing, and understand that there are times where easy example on this, a few years back, I wound up doing one of those downfall parody videos where Hitler reacts to his AWS bill, and I did a whole thing on that, and like, you provide a script on it, and the mistake that I made, with completely on thinking, but that doesn't matter because impact outweighs intent by a lot, was I had the only spoken line by a woman in that entire thing is one turns to another. And the line that I used was, "That's okay. I get terabytes and gigabytes confused too." And that was because I'd actually done that in a calculation earlier that day. And it was, yeah, it was top of mind. It did not land that way. A number of people took that as being very problematic in a bunch of ways. And they were correct. I took the video down and I apologized in a thread about exactly why I'd done that. Because my point is not to make people feel crappy, at least not unless they are, executives at multi-trillion dollar companies, in which case, in some cases, yeah, you're trying to make a whole bunch of money by selling me a thing. Maybe you should feel somewhat bad about this. And there have been times where I've gotten it wrong, and I've deleted tweets as a result where it doesn't land the way that I intended it. There have been times where I'm always relatively quick to apologize, and I think that's where people get into trouble on social media, because whenever someone says whatever it is that they wind up their position on this is, my immediate reaction, even now, is I feel a flash of defensiveness, and I've learned to walk away for a minute, get a drink of water, think it through, calm down, and then think about it much more dispassionately. And I've been able to shorten that cycle. Like, because people don't generally, believe it or not, like to start those fights. Like, that wasn't funny because of X. It's not one of those areas where, like, the people, at least that I curate, as far as my following goes, are not out there just to pick fights. They're when someone says that wasn't funny, really think about why someone's saying that. Because I tell lots of jokes and I don't get those reactions very often. Where people get into trouble is They give in to that flash of defensiveness, and then they double down on what they said, and they double down again, and they double down again. And before you know it, they have put themselves into a situation where absolutely no one can come and help them out of it. It Whereas if they had just said, "Oh, you're right. That wasn't quite what I intended and wasn't the direction I was going in. I'll do better," and moved on, it would have been a non-issue.
It would have dragged on and on. It would have probably been quickly forgotten. Now it's something that's going to resonate and you're following and people are going to look at you different.
Exactly, and the fact that you're asking me, "Do I ever delete tweets?" is a perfect example of this. It's why you're not asking me a question, "So what was that horrifying shit you put out there a while back that wound up leading to newspaper articles and half your customers diverting you and a whole bunch of people resigned from your company because they didn't want to support your nonsense?" Yeah, like, that is the failure mode of this, and there's very little upside because I gotta level with you. Even if I come up with what I believe to be the best joke ever, and the industry disagrees and finds it problematic, well, I can probably find a better joke. I don't know that I can necessarily come back from making people feel less than. I was bullied a lot as a kid. I don't want to be that person.
I know when you and I were talking, and this was back, I think this was actually back when I was at AWS. I was mentioning that, I'd like to have you back on the show. This was actually probably early 2021. And I made a comment and I was like, yeah, we'll see. It was something like, did Corey Quinn like trim his long hair or something like that? Do you remember that comment? It was somewhere along the lines. And you, as your personality, don't take it personal, but you were like, make sure you understand the person you're working with and that the joke doesn't offend them or resonate, and try not to poke fun of people. And it was really kind of, I was taken back coming from you because I was like, wait a second, isn't that what Corey does? And Corey doesn't do that on a personal level. He does it on a corporate level, except for one person. And your advice has actually helped me in some of my stuff, is like, always know who you're talking with and try not to, they might take it wrong or they might be offended. They might have a personal relationship with their hair. Who knows? But I remember that advice and I've kind of taken that throughout my podcast.
I don't remember that conversation, but it does sound like something I'd say. Let me give you another
You want me
example.
to dig that up on Chime? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's referring
I
to a
know, I
whole
just
bunch,
messed.
referring to a group of people as guys, for example. There are two schools of thought on that. One is that, well, guys is non-gendered. And, well, the easy rejoinder to that is, cool. So, how many guys did you sleep with back in college? Because it's always a dude bringing that up. And the other side of it is that, well, no, it's like it does make people who do not identify as men, or sorry, who are not men, wind up being feeling less than. So the two modes are is I it took me a year to get that out of my vocabulary back when I was still employed in a regular job, and because I was a public speaker. And my reasoning behind that was, if no one is going to feel upset or less than if I refer to a room as folks, but some people clearly will if I refer to them as guys. Therefore, I should not do that. That was my thought process at the time, and I stand by that. It's I'm not saying that you have to go out of your way to avoid ever causing offense to anyone. I mean, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of marketing people that would gleefully strangle me given half the option. But you don't do it based upon things that people are or things that they might take very personally. Whereas things that they do is often a little bit better, but you also never know the backstory behind something. And the perils are massive in return for what is admittedly a fairly weak joke. It's Whereas no one is going to be offended by and large when I point out that a service from AWS has a funny name. Sure, someone who named it and went through all those meetings might be a little irked at it, but it doesn't strike at the core of their self identity in any realistic way. That's where I tend to draw the line. And I'm not suggesting I always get it right, but again, the whole point is to try and do better tomorrow than you did yesterday. That's how I see it.
Like AWS Infodash? Was it Infidi?
Infinidash was a great joke.
Infinidash. That's right.
Yes, someone over at Twilio came up with that joke, and I love that. JNA_SH on Twitter.
That
Loved the gag. It turned into something amazing. I wish I'd come up with it.
that was right. Wait a second. I thought you did, or you just took it
I did
on. You
not.
took
I
it to the next
absolutely
level.
Oh, I wound up, publicizing it. Other people have done stickers on it and the rest. I thought it was awesome. Now, the downside to that is that some people were starting to get confused and not getting the joke. So, okay, you have to periodically reference the fact that it's a joke so people can appreciate it and join in, as opposed
Yeah.
to feeling foolish or misled after they try and look for documentation of a non-existent service.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears real quick here before we wrap
Please
things up
do.
in the next couple of minutes. Corey, what is exactly a cloud economist? What is your role there? And what does your company do for folks? Because I know Cloud Bill is always at the top of your mind.
You basically answered the question. People have
Okay, just
horrifying
checking.
AWS bills because it's an unbounded growth problem. I tend to believe a few things around this. One is that the AWS bill, left in isolation, becomes an unbounded growth problem because there's nothing that acts as a forcing function to turn things off. The bill is also derived less from how many customers you have and more by how many engineers you hire, and that it is an equal mix in many respects of arithmetic and psychology. I often call it what we do being marriage counseling between engineering and finance. There's an awful lot of human factor that weighs into this, and the bills are interestingly complex. Architecture is expressed through bills, and because we do this in an advisory consulting sense, we are not beholden to internal stakeholders necessarily. We look at these things and say, oh, if you do X, you will save approximately Y. It also gets into more forward looking approaches, such as understanding what the unit economic model looks like. And about half of our consulting, to be very direct, is helping companies negotiate their long term commitments and other contracts with AWS itself. The thing that often surprises people is like, oh, Amazon must hate you. It's no, every time we get involved, it turns out the contract negotiation goes a hell of a lot more smoothly because suddenly we're talking their customers no longer asking for things that they cannot grant, and instead is coming with better data and saying this is what we believe is going to happen, this is what we would like. It's a lot easier to grant that than try and guess what the customer really means when they're saying something. We have practice with these things.
What is exactly your role at your company? A cloud economist, but I think you're like in marketing and social. I mean, first of all, if anybody were to mention, the Duckbill Group, obviously Corey Quinn comes to mind right away. Sorry, Mike. No offense. I did get a chance to meet you. But so we would, my bad. But anyway, I mean, like, really, what is your role? When do you come into the conversation, or are you just part of marketing? I mean, help me understand.
No, great question. We have a couple of excellent principal cloud economists. We have Tim Banks and we have Alex Rasmussen at the time of this recording, and they are better at this stuff than I ever was on the being able to generate out a holistic analysis of a full-on customer environment. I like coming in for about half a day and finding the really interesting expressions of things, finding the meaningful levers. I'm bad at the documentation part. I'm bad at building out full-on reports on this, and I'm bad at the persistent diligence on these things on an ongoing basis. I am brought in for specifically weird inflection point issues, but you're right. A lot of what I do is spent on content and understanding how these various services fit together and doing inside R&D work for future stuff. There's a lot that factors into it, but I am no longer, for example, running engagements myself most of the time. Every once in a while, I do go back into it just to make sure that I understand the experience on both sides of that table. But effectively, I am there more or less as oversight as opposed to the person doing the day to day work. That said, we also don't hire junior people. So customers in some cases have said, "Oh, well, we want Corey involved in this engagement." It's like, I promise you don't. You want a good outcome. Why don't we go with the people who are better at this than I am? This is not the big consultancy model where the named partner comes in and tells you beautiful stories and then drops someone fresh out of grad school onto you who has no real world experience to work on Excel for 80 hours a week. It doesn't work that way. I mean, sure, if I wanted to turn this into a building revenue project instead of the actually getting customers to a better outcome, yeah, maybe that would be interesting. But I continue to be guided by what I wish had existed back when I was running ops teams and I was distracted by the AWS bill because that's the burning fire of the moment. And it was unplanned work and I was not being measured on the success of any of that. I wanted to be able to pay someone else to make it their problem. I strive to be the company or the person that I wish had existed back then, but didn't.
You indicated you're bad at documentation. Are you bad at writing it? Because I explicitly remember saying you tweeting that you read everything that comes out of AWS documentation. So I'm assuming it's bad at writing documentation.
Yes, I'm bad at documenting exactly the ins and the outs. And again, I crave novelty. It's the joys of my own particular expression of ADHD. Whereas, so talking to someone about, oh, well, you haven't bought the right RIs. Like, sure, the first time you find something really interesting or a managed NAT gateway data processing fee issue, it's interesting. But a lot of this stuff maps between accounts. Is why it's such a great consulting space because it doesn't matter what your company does specifically. The expressions of cloud architecture tend to remain fairly constant between environments, regardless of whether you're streaming videos or selling widgets. And that's a problem that I really like because the things I work on become repeatable. The first time I do something, it's awesome and innovative and groundbreaking. And the third time I do it, okay, I've gotten this down. And the eighth time, it's torture because I don't want to talk about this one thing anymore. I want to do something else. My options were really expand the company beyond just me or shut it down and go pivot to something else. I think I made the right decision. Some people might disagree. You really wish you
So
just shut
far,
up and gone away. It's like, "Yeah, I hear you. I hear you."
so far, yes, you've made the right decision. I think I feel the same way where if I keep doing the same repetitive tasks, except for podcasting, because I don't talk to the same people repetitively. And if I do, it's about a different subject. Doing these is fun, but doing the same repetitive tasks is like, yeah, what's next? I'm done with this. I want to do
I've
something
had
else. So,
400 episodes now screaming in the cloud, and I don't get bored doing those
yep,
because I get to
exactly.
borrow someone else's brain about something they're passionate about for half an hour every time I do it. Like, how do you get bored with that?
No,
If you like
I
people, I
love it.
posit you can't.
I love it. The conversation having with people, and you can usually tell from my energy level that comes across from start to finish and beforehand, where it's like, "Hey, how you doing? No problem." Then all of a sudden, we kick it into high gear and we have a fun conversation. People hang around for this casual. Let's get to know these people, and there's really, I mean, literally, Corey and I have no script in front of it. Right before the recording, I said, "I'm going to ask you this question, and wherever it goes from there, that's it." And that's how the conversations go.
And my response was effectively, "Great. There's nothing you're gonna throw my way that I won't be able to handle." The way I do it requires a little bit more prep than that. It's because a lot of times I'm talking to folks who just need a little encouragement to be able to tell their story. I ask what topics they want to make sure that we talk about. I ask what topics we want to make sure we don't talk about because given my reputation, which I'm not blind to entirely, I know that there's gonna be some nervousness of, "Is he just here to make me look bad?" Well, no, I that is not what the show's about. And I also like to ask another question or two around there, such as, what can I ask to help you present as your absolute best? And there's also the question I ask everyone to normalize it: how do you pronounce your name? And I asked my best friend. Our relationship is old enough to drink from back from middle school, and he and I know how his name is pronounced, Brandon Shaw. But I ask everyone that question because I want to normalize that. And I get some strange looks at it, but I'm still going to do it just because names are important. And there's no better way for me to say I don't care about my guest than to screw up their name. This isn't a Starbucks order. Steve, call me Steve. Just give me my coffee. It'll be fine. Names are important, and what people want to be called matters. People matter. And I think that's something we lose sight of in this industry.
I do the same thing in the beginning of the calls where I have a little hard trouble myself pronouncing. I'm like, "How do you pronounce it?" And they're like, "No, don't worry about it." No, no, no. We need to worry about it.
Mhm.
I have to do this. You don't understand. I will write it out. I will say it 100 times going into it. And if I pronounce it wrong, I want you to correct me, and I will definitely make sure it's right. I find it respectful, obviously, in our profession, is to make sure you do that. I can attest to your exact questions. And by the way, they haven't changed in 2 years because I was actually on your podcast and mine released. Actually, it was a year and a half ago, I think September back in 2020, maybe right around there. Those were the questions you asked me. Like, what can we talk about? What don't we want to talk about? What's important to you? And actually, that's how I asked all my guests when I do these. I was like, this is not about me. It's about you. What do you want to talk? I am the median. I'm just a guy that's going to pull out those questions, get a little more deeper, and get your personality out there and get the audience enjoying who you are and your story that needs to be told.
That's the approach I generally try to take, and it seems to be working so far. People come back on the show sometimes. Other times I've never yet I have a perfect track record so far of 400 episodes in of never once getting someone sanctioned for appearing on the show. Because my whole point is like, "Oh, you wanna have your PR team look at and approve it?" Absolutely. There have been a couple that have gotten torpedoed just because, oh, legal got wind of it and they don't want this to go out at often regulated companies. But okay, again, I'm not in this to get anyone in trouble. It never sees
Yep.
the light of day without their tacit approval.
100%. So, Corey, what's next for you? What event is next, or what's on your plate? What is exciting for you that you want to share with the audience? I'd like to know what event you might be at next, so we can run in and have another conversation. But
Oh, I'll be in New York for the AWS Summit. And as of this recording, a week ago, we kicked off reInvent planning because that's only 6 months away. And this year, for once, I'm going to do a little bit more than seat of the pants flying. I'm bringing a team with me this time. It'll be fun. More to come on
uh,
that in future months.
okay, New York, I will be there. I'm an hour and a half away, as you know. Actually, Corey, wait a second, Corey, weren't you born? You were born in my area in Pennsylvania. Where was you born? Or you
Oh
lived?
yeah, I've been all over the place. I lived in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, got expelled from boarding schools in New York and Vermont. Most of my childhood was spent in Maine, Wisconsin, and now, well, California for half my life. And it's weird. I guess I still don't view myself as being from California, but this is where I've spent more time than anywhere else.
So you will be at New York. I will be at New York Summit. This recording will probably go out just about right around the time of that because I do quick turnarounds. I do my own editings and quickly I'll get it out as soon as possible. I will see you in New York. We have to talk about reInvent. I got an awesome place sponsored by NOps and a bunch of other folks. Go to Market Delta, probably Kidcaster. We actually got a villa. It's going to be basically a podcasting type studio setup, live keynote streaming. You can come in, donate to your favorite, like Girls in Tech, whatever you like to do. And you can live tweet. We're going to have the full on recording session. I'd like to invite you there. You don't have to answer. You're on the spot, but you don't have to answer. Come on in, do a recording, use the room, whatever, have some fun.
It's appreciated. More to come in future months.
Yeah, there you go. I know we've kicked off our reInvent planning as well. We'll talk when it gets closer to that. I know you get really busy and hectic out there, as you should. So I really appreciate it. Corey, anything else you want to share with the audience before we wrap things up?
No, as always, if people are curious what the hell we're talking about, the best place to find me is lastweekinaws.com, where basically you get to see a distilled version of the personality you've just been sitting through for half an hour. As always, thanks for the time, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to that newsletter that comes out. When does the newsletter come out?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at the moment.
There you
The
go, Brian.
roundup is
Wow,
on
that's a
Monday, Wednesday's long form, and Thursdays is about security content.
ooh. Wait. Does that mean you're going to be at the Reinforce?
No, not this year.
Not this year. Yeah, I'm not sure. It is
I
the
did just
actual
go to
second.
RSA, which was wild and fun, but that's a separate
I
argument.
saw that. I'm a little disappointed I wasn't there with a lot of the folks, but I did follow some of the things that were going on. But we will definitely be talking here in the future. We'll catch up in New York. Everybody, Corey Quinn, Cloud Economist for the Duckbill Group. Dude, I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, John.
All right, my name's John Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of here.